IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Tuesday, April 23rd, and as always, there's a lot going on in Notre Dame Nation. And of course, there's a lot going on at IB Nation. So thanks for joining me today. Going to be a fun show today. Going to call a little bit of an audible. Today, I was going to plan on introducing our new format for the show. And with the breaking news that Micah Bell has entered the transfer portal, I'm going to call a little bit of an audible. And today we're going to focus a lot on the cornerback position. So we'll talk about Micah Bell, how his decision impacts Notre Dame, and we'll dive into a little bit of what this means for Notre Dame recruiting and how this is the roster is going to be impacted presently and in the future. So over the next week, we will start to kind of release and go with what the new show format is. And just to give you guys an idea, a couple things we're still working on. This isn't topic stuff. This is more just structural stuff of how the shows are going to go. We are going to still maintain moving forward. Obviously, Monday to Friday shows. We're still trying to work on getting some more weekend shows going, but right now we're not able to do that. We hope to kind of have that rolling here by the end of the spring and into the summer. But what we're going to do is, we'll have our mailbag on Monday. We'll have our recruiting show on Friday. And then in between, I'm going to do a lot of different solo shows. I'm hoping to have more guests on and things along those lines. But just from and that's more of a content standpoint. But from a structural standpoint, we're going to try to get into each show and get into different topics every day and have 2 to 3 different topics that we cover. And then we're going to do something kind of fun, I think fun, at the end of every show. So at the end of every show, we'll have like a different segment. So every Tuesday will be a certain segment. Every Wednesday will be a certain segment. Every Thursday will be a certain segment, things along those lines. And the way that the format is going to go right now, and this is still subject to change. We're going to kind of mess with it a little bit, see how it goes. But essentially what it's going to be is, so Monday shows will be the mailbag. Tuesday we'll have different team, college football, other different topics. And then we'll have an Inside the Numbers, like a sort of an inside the numbers breakdown. I'll take some sort of statistical look at Notre Dame, college football, and then I'm going to end every Tuesday show with a film room. It will be something recruiting related. It could be just a player. It could be a position group, but I'm going to have some fun and getting back to I want to start breaking down more film. I want to start talking more recruiting. I've had a lot of people ask for it. Ryan does a great job in his segment. I'm not going to be repeating things he's doing, but just especially as we get into the spring and summer and there's no team, just doing more of that stuff. That's going to be on Tuesdays. Wednesday's show is going to be, again, a couple different team topics. And then at the final segment of the Wednesday show is going to be a buy, sell, or hold segment that we'll do every Wednesday. And then as of right now, the Thursday show is going to be, 2 to 3 team recruiting topics. And then I'm going to do sort of an around the nation. And that'll be something where I talk about something that's more college football related. As much as I can when it's relevant, I will try to talk about topics that have something to do with Notre Dame. But sometimes I just want to be able to talk about other things. And I know that some people don't care to talk about things that are not related to Notre Dame, but I've had a lot of people ask for it. And if you're a fan of the show, I think most of you kind of want to get my opinion on certain things. And so, I'll talk about some sort of college football related topic at the end of that show. There's a couple other segments that I'm working on, maybe trying to fit in to these as well. But as of right now, that's the general plan. And somebody had asked about the midweek musings, the midweek rundown, I should say. That is kind of what a lot of these shows are now. It's just topic, some sort of ending. And so that's just kind of the format we're going for a lot of these. I'll probably, name the Wednesday show back to midweek rundown, get back to that, but that's kind of where we are. Also for start times, for now, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday shows will be at 2:00 start times. Monday and Friday will stay at 1 for those start times. So that'll just kind of be where we are for now. That may adjust as we get into the summer, but I just kind of wanted to lay it all out with you guys. We're going to also, here over the next couple of months, make some changes to the IB Nation Sports Talk show. So we're just trying to, have some more fun and bring different types of contents. But at the heart of it all is going to be talking Notre Dame football. That is always going to be the heart of what we're doing. and we're just trying to get into some different topics instead of like one topic for like an hour and a half. Just try to get into some different topics, and so I'm looking forward to having some of that stuff. So, um, that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm looking forward to it. I think you guys will all have some fun with it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So before we get in today's show too, last week I'm a horrible son. Last week was my dad's birthday last Wednesday, and I didn't do a show, so I couldn't wish my dad a happy birthday. My dad listens to all the shows. He and my mom are certainly my biggest fans. So it's late, Dad, but I did want to wish you a happy birthday to my dad, and also wanted to quickly begin just a little personal thing. And I know some of you don't care about that, but most of you do, so I'm going to talk about it anyway. My buddy J Mac is in the hospital right now, and he's going to have surgery tomorrow. So definitely praying for him, and that he has a speedy recovery, and that the doctors are wise in what they're able to do, and he can get healthy so he can get ready for the season, because it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a fun one. Today's topic is going to be partly fun and partly not so fun, because today we're going to start talking about the decision that was announced today of Micah Bell to transfer from Notre Dame. So obviously that was the big news that broke. I was in a meeting with Ryan today, and we were going over a bunch of new things and some changes we're going to make to how we're covering recruiting and different aspects of that. And all of a sudden he stops and he looks down and he's like, "Did you see what just happened?" I was like, "No, I didn't see it." And he goes, "Yeah, Micah Bell just entered the portal." So, Micah was not a kid that I had heard a lot of entering the portal, to be honest. I don't want to sit here and be like, "Oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen." I didn't know that it was going to happen. I had hoped he wouldn't leave. I'm not super shocked that he's leaving. I'm a little bummed. And so what I'm going to try to do here over the next little bit with this is I'm going to explain kind of what happened, and I'm going to try my best to be very clear between what I know and what's my opinion. And so we'll begin a little bit with what we know with Micah Bell's decision to transfer. Obviously, that was announced today. Micah released that late this morning, early afternoon, and he put out that he was entering the portal. I don't know a lot of the reasons for it. This was not a situation where Micah was pushed out. This was not a situation where he was told, "Hey, you don't have room." That's what I've been told. This was a decision that Micah made on his own. I do believe, that's what I know. I do believe, however, that Micah was aware that the depth chart at that position was going to be a challenge this year. There were some opportunities for him maybe down the road, but with the way that Notre Dame is recruiting that position, he had a lot of room for improvement he needed to make. Now, the good news for him is he was making a lot of improvement. I've said in some intel in the past that he was a guy that I had talked to some people about, really started to come along late in the fall, made some strides this spring. There's a lot of room. He's got to get stronger. He's got to become a better tackler. We've talked about that. His technique is still inconsistent, but you also saw on Saturday that he has opportunities to make some plays. He got beat for a touchdown, also had the pass breakup on the final play of the game that helped win the game, and had good coverage on a go ball to KK Smith earlier in the game as well. So, Micah was evolving and developing as a player, but it was going to be a challenge. Notre Dame had Jaden Alsbury playing rover this spring, and he was doing so well with it that, to be honest, they got in a situation where he could just do things that none of the other rovers could do. And so they started having him essentially serve as the number 2 nickel. And Marcus Freeman talked about this after the game, and he basically said they moved him to nickel. My understanding is that he's not technically a nickel in the traditional sense, but essentially he's practices with them and goes through those drills. He can still play linebacker. You saw him kind of cheating into the box at different times, which they're going to do more with him than they did a typical rover or nickel. But it's almost kind of like a hybrid position that's unique to Jaden Alsbury because of his unique skill set. What that means is, since Jaden is ahead of Micah in his development, instead of having like the number 2 nickel right now, it's going to be the nickel, or Jalen Snead could play there and as the rover. And then instead of a second nickel, you might see some of Jaden Alsbury in that position. And so it was going to be a challenge for him. Now, could he have still battled and gotten playing time? Sure. And that kid's fast. He can fly. And there's some talent there to work with. But it was a situation where this is my opinion. where I think Micah just saw a little bit of the what was kind of happening around him and how they were recruiting, and just really felt like he might have better opportunities elsewhere. That's my opinion. What I know is what I told you before. He was not forced out. This is not a situation where he wasn't going to class. He was getting in trouble. He was a problem on the roster. None of that's true. Like, this wasn't one of those situations. He wasn't told, you don't have a spot, leave. I don't think that was true. They had honest conversations with him, like they do every player on the team, about where he stood. And this is my opinion. I believe he just looked at it and said, I think I might have better opportunities elsewhere. That's what I think happened. And whenever you lose a player of Micah Bell's talent, that's a problem. And I shouldn't say a problem. That's a loss. It is a loss. I don't want to be that guy that every time a kid leaves Notre Dame, okay, let's turn on the spin machine, get that sucker going, and convince everyone why this isn't a loss and they're better off without him. Look, you have a kid with that kind of speed, you never, ever say, we can't find a home for that kid. We can't find a role for that kid. And I don't think that's where the Notre Dame coaches were either. They were realistic about how much he needed to grow and where he needed to develop and all those type of things. But this was not a situation where Micah, was just a lost cause. It was going to be a battle, and he's going in a different direction. And now Notre Dame's going to go out and do the best they can in regard to putting a product out there. And that's where the emergence of, over the spring of Jaden Alsbury, it played a role. I mean, we can't say that it didn't play a role, because going into the spring, Micah was the number 2 player at that position. He was getting some work, and there were some times he was getting some work with the ones when Jordan Clark was kind of getting back to health. But the more and more Jaden Alsbury started getting comfortable at that position, the more and more he was playing there as part of sort of a hybrid position, as opposed to what we were seeing from Micah Bell. So I do think that factored into it. So Micah Bell is no longer with the Notre Dame program. He is going to he has entered the transfer portal. And this is also a situation where this is going to sound like spin. I understand it, but this is just something that Notre Dame fans have to come to grips with a little bit. So 2 things can be true at the same time. And in this case with Micah Bell, I think that's true. Number 1 is, you can say a kid, I would much rather Micah Bell's to be on the Notre Dame football team. I would. Anytime you have a kid who, from everything I've been told, good kid, comes from a great family. Again, no issues from that standpoint from what I'm told. But you have a kid who has speed, good kid, and has potential. You always want a kid like that on your roster, because if the light goes on, the light's going on for a guy who's a mid to low 4.3 guy. That's always a good thing. You always want guys like that on your roster. But also, you can look at it and say, this is also a symptom of what's happening right now in the Marcus Freeman era. And what I mean by that is, look, there are going to be some guys that transfer over the next year. There could be some guys that transfer this year. I don't know for a fact that certain guys are going to transfer, but I put this on the message board a little bit ago. People need to take a deep breath and relax and think through things, and maybe listen to some people that you trust to shoot you straight. And I hope that I've earned that trust for most of you, because sometimes you'll have people that'll spin things, and I'm just speaking in general. This could be true about Notre Dame, other teams, politics, history, TV shows, food, whatever. We get a lot of spin. But I'm always going to give you guys an honest assessment of how I see it, and then what I hear. But then also, from the things that I hear, I always use discernment of, you're trying to tell me something, and I know that not to be true, or I don't disagree with that. So I will shoot you straight. But here's the thing that some of us are going to have to accept. Notre Dame is going to lose players that we consider talented players, that were highly ranked players, that might surprise some of us, whether it's this year, next year. Again, I don't have a specific player in mind with what I'm saying. I have heard some things about guys that might leave. So in that regard, I do know of some of these situations. But the reality is they're in a situation, and I think some of you started to see it in the spring game. The recruiting that Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden and this staff have done in the 23 and 24 classes has completely changed the roster composition at Notre Dame. Their willingness and ability to go to the portal for potential impact players has changed things quite a bit. And what does that mean? That means that right now, Notre Dame is getting closer and closer to being where Georgia and Alabama are. And that's something that we have to embrace as Notre Dame fans. What does that mean? Are they on the same level of Alabama and Georgia from a championship type of team? No, they're not, because they haven't won a championship yet. They haven't won a New Year's Six Bowl in 30 years. They haven't won a playoff game. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is just when you're recruiting the way that they're recruiting, you're going to have kids get over recruited. And that means guys that were highly ranked, guys that are talented, are sometimes going to look over their shoulders and say, nah, I don't want that. I don't want to deal with that. I want to have this opportunity to kind of go play somewhere else where I know I'm going to be the guy. That's happening all around college football. That's been happening at Georgia for a while. That's been happening at Bama for a while. That happens at Ohio State, where they lose some big time recruit. And we as fans look back and like, wow, did you guys see that Alabama lost so-and-so player? And you're just like, yeah, that's a bummer, man. What's going on at Bama? And then you read and look into it and you're like, oh, he got beat out by some younger guy. Georgia lost a guy that started for them on their championship team at linebacker 2 years ago. Why? Because when he got banged up this year, basically a younger, more talented player kind of started to beat him out, and he wasn't going to be guaranteed playing time. That's kind of happening at Notre Dame right now to a degree, where – and Ape Gambino just had a great point. This is what happened with Prince Colley. He was going to get passed up by the younger linebackers. He was not going to play the way he wanted to play. And so while it may, for us as fans, like, man, I thought that guy could play. I thought that guy, there was high hopes for that guy. But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, but that guy's getting beat out, or that guy's hold on his position is a bit tenuous. Some kids in that situation are going to say, that's cool. I'm going to still stay and compete. I'm going to battle. I'm going to win this job. And if I don't, then I'm going to do whatever the team asks me to do. There's going to be kids like that. But some of them are just going to leave. And it's not always NIL. It's not always some nefarious thing. Sometimes it's just dude got beat out. And that's not an ideal place to be from the standpoint of you always want to have everybody. It's like what I said yesterday. You know, is Notre Dame going to be fine without Holden State's a tight end? Yeah, they're going to be fine. But wouldn't they be even better if they had Mitchell Evans, Eli Raridan, Cooper Flanagan, Jack Larson, and Holden Stace? I've always felt that way. I want as much talent on my roster as possible if I'm a football coach. But that's just not the world we live in. And it's never been the world we live in. I mean, Dorsey Levens transferred out of Notre Dame because he was buried on the running back depth chart. He goes to Georgia Tech, runs for 1,000 yards, and is a Super Bowl winning running back with the Green Bay Packers. Did Notre Dame force him out? Was he a bad? No, I'm buried on the depth chart here. That's life when you're at a top program, and Notre Dame is starting to get into that situation. Now, in some places that can hurt you because your depth at the position may not be great, but in other places, like I had somebody that asked me, and I won't say the position, but hey, what happens if this guy transfers and that guy transfers? Won't they be hurting at depth? And I said, okay, well, let me ask you this. If that guy leaves, this is what the depth chart in the fall is going to look like. And I named a bunch of players. I said, taking out the context of losing those two guys, do you have a lack of confidence that they have the numbers and talent to be impactful there? And he's like, no, they're still pretty loaded. And that's kind of where Notre Dame is getting to. They're not completely there yet, but there's a lot of positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, interior offensive line, defensive tackle, linebacker, where they can lose a guy and say, yeah, that guy's pretty good, but they're okay. Cornerback's a bit of an interesting situation, and I'll get into that here next, but that's just a reality that we have to come to grips with as Notre Dame fans, is when you recruit the way that Notre Dame is recruiting, that some guys are just going to leave. And that's been true since I've been a Notre Dame fan. I mean, I could start naming guys that transferred out of Notre Dame during their golden years of 88 to 93 that went on to be pretty good college football players and played in the NFL. And it's a symptom of of being in a good place. When that's happening, you're actually in a good place as a program. Now, you have to be careful as a program that you're not losing too many kids at a position. So you've got to make sure that you're in a place where, okay, we can lose a kid or two, but others are going to stay. And that's where recruiting is so important. You've got to make sure you're bringing in the right kind of kids that are coming for the right reasons and are going to stick it out. This is why I say, just a little rant here before I move on to the next section. This is why I say buying players at Notre Dame in high school is a bad idea. Because if you have to pay a kid to come here, that's driving his decision-making, which means if he's not playing, he's going to jump in the portal, look for a payday somewhere else. Or if he plays well, he's going to jump in the portal, look for a payday somewhere else, or hold it over your head to, hey, I want more money or I'm leaving. Those are not the kind of players that you want to get that you want in your program. And so Notre Dame has to be smart to make sure they have more and more kids that are going to be in it for the long haul as much as possible. You can't stop attrition. And in some instances, it's needed. Notre Dame is still over the 85 scholarship limit. They have to lose more players. And if they want to add guys, they have to lose even more. And so, those are aspects of it that I think we have to keep in mind as we dive into this portal season, because they are going to lose kids. Some of them we will expect. Some of them we may not expect. And so we have to be prepared for that. And this Micah Bell one is not one that I was expecting, but it's also one that when you think about it, you're like, yeah, I get it. I'm not happy about it, but you understand it. So that's going to do it for this next section. Next, I'm going to kind of talk about where Notre Dame is at cornerback for 2024, how this impacts the Notre Dame roster, and then sort of look for the future as well. But before we do, folks, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. And if you're listening via podcast platform like Spotify or Apple, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. Part 2 of this is going to look at where things stand at cornerback now that Micah Bell has left, because Micah Bell is now the second cornerback to leave the roster this spring and the second player that could potentially play the nickel position. Obviously, Micah joins Clarence Lewis, who jumped in the portal earlier in the spring. Clarence could do that earlier because he's a grad transfer, and graduates there is no window for graduates. They can jump in the portal whenever they want. They may not always be eligible at that upcoming season, but, so if the kid leaves in fall camp, he can't go play somewhere else in the fall, but Clarence could leave in the spring to be eligible to play in the fall somewhere. So Clarence left. He was the backup nickel last year. Micah was competing for that job this year. Clarence also provided great depth outside. He's a kid that started games for Notre Dame at outside cornerback, started for him on a playoff team. You lost a very experienced player in Clarence Lewis. Now you lose a younger player that, while he doesn't have any experience, he played a little bit in the bowl game and did some solid things. But he was a developing player, a guy that you thought you might have a chance to do something with, and a guy that you thought that, maybe someday could do something. So now, where is Notre Dame for the 2024 season at cornerback? And then we'll kind of talk about the future. So number one, at outside cornerback, this doesn't really affect Notre Dame at all. Notre Dame is going to have 6 scholarship cornerbacks on the roster in 2024. You're going to have Benjamin Morrison. You're going to have Christian Gray. You're going to have Jaden Mickey. You're also going to be in a situation where you're going to have Chance Tucker. You hope that Chance will come back to help continue to provide depth. He's a quality young man. So you're going to have him at corner next year. And then in the summer, you're going to welcome Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. I think one of them could maybe step in as a freshman and provide depth. We'll see which one. I have my opinion on who I think is more technically advanced, but with Carson Hobbs' strength and speed, I could see him doing it. I'm very high on Leonard Moore, as you guys know, and what he can bring to the table. So outside cornerback, they're not in a bad place. However, Notre Dame has been looking in the portal for a while not for a while, since it really opened up, for another corner. they would like an experienced corner to come in. And that's why, last week they had Trayshawn Devones visited last week from Rice. He started this past season for the Owls. I believe had 2 picks, over 40 tackles, solid veteran player, likely not a guy that comes in and just blows everyone out and just dominates a starting job. He'll come in and compete, and he'll battle, and at the very least provide veteran depth at both outside corner positions, and also a guy that can play special teams. And so he gives you a little protection against injury. So let's just say Benjamin Morrison gets hurt again, or let's say he's not ready. And I don't know when Benjamin Morrison's going to be healthy. They haven't told us. I'm just trying to, prepare for a scenario where he re-injures his shoulder. He's not healthy till game 4. You're now in a situation where you have Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray, and you say, hey, feel good about that. But after that, you have no experience. Chance Tucker has never played really any meaningful snaps. You'd have the 2 freshmen. So getting a kid like Trayshawn Devones would give them a little bit of protection against that. And so there's some interest there. And then if he comes in and he's better than expected, then maybe he can push the other guys that are on the roster, because competition's always a good thing. And he brings some strength to the position, and there's a lot of things that he brings to the table at that outside cornerback position. So I do believe that Notre Dame wants to bring in a portal corner. That's not a surprise to anyone. We've been talking about that here now for a couple weeks. And so don't be surprised. And if they don't get Trayshawn Devones, don't be surprised if they keep looking in the portal for some guys. And I also wouldn't be shocked if there's maybe an Ivy League kid or two that they talk to. This is my opinion, an Ivy League kid or two that they talk to about maybe coming in and being a preferred walk-on and helping to provide a little bit of depth as well. But outside cornerback, if you're able to get a solid portal player, I'm comfortable with where Notre Dame is at cornerback in 2024, because you have Benjamin Morrison coming back whenever that's going to be. You have Christian Gray. You have Jaden Mickey. You have Chance Tucker. You have 2 freshmen that you like. And then, of course, if you can get a portal guy, it gives you a little bit of depth. So I'm not as concerned about it. And Micah Bell leaving, honestly, doesn't really impact that at all. He played some outside cornerback in the spring game, but his ideal position was going to be in the slot at nickel. And so that's where more of this is a hit. And so you have Jordan Clark, who's a 6-year senior. You have Jaden Osbury at that position. And then after that, you're in a bit of a tough spot, because on the outside, you have a lot of talent, but you're going to be young. On the inside, you've got Jordan Clark, you've got Jaden Osbury. So you've got a veteran, and then you've got a young, talented player that's never played. After that, you don't really have a lot at that position, which is a little bit concerning. There are maybe some players outside that you could cross-train to play inside. But here's the deal. If you are in a situation where you have to move someone outside inside, then now all of a sudden you've hurt your outside depth. And so, that's a bit of a challenging situation. And so, you're in a situation where if you have an injury or something in the slot, you're now in a little bit of a tough spot when you want to play your nickel looks. That's the problem. And so I don't know the answers to that. And I don't know that the answers to that are necessarily going to come at corner. And so where Micah Bell leaving creates a bit of a problem for 2024 is there. It's the nickel. If Jordan Clark stays healthy and Jaden Osbury stays healthy, they'll be fine. But as we all know, you can't guarantee that guys are going to be healthy. Here's where, and somebody brought this up earlier, here's where potentially Rod Hurd could help you. And when you look at Rod Hurd, Notre Dame recruited him to play safety. He's going to battle at safety. He's a guy that every expectation. And, we're in a situation where if you get into a problem, this is a kid who had over 80 tackles last year as a nickel for Northwestern. He could play that as well. But again, that makes a lot of sense for nickel. But what is the moving Rod Hurd if you're forced to do that? it's not just as simple as, well, it solidifies nickel, because now you've hurt yourself at safety, because now it's Xavier Watts, and now you need the younger players to perform. That's where the offseason is going to be huge for Notre Dame when you look at guys like Adon Schuler, Luke Talich, Ben Minnick stepping up. You've got Kennedy Urlacher had a good spring. Bronte Johnson arrives this summer as well. Tabron Benny Powell arrives this summer. So you're going to really need your young depth chart at safety to step up and emerge and play well. So that way, if you get into a situation where you have to move a Rod Hurd, then you're okay. But I know from what my conversations are with people, they don't want to move Rod Hurd back to nickel. They like him at safety. They think he can be a really good player at safety. He solidifies that depth chart. But that's where the loss of a guy like Micah Bell can hurt, because on the inside, it really creates some issues. When I look at some other options that Notre Dame could go with, what it could do at times is this could just force Notre Dame to be more of a nickel team, or a base defense team. That's the other thing. And so when you look at Notre Dame's current roster, if they were to do that, then you'd have a little bit more options. You'd have the option of putting Jalen Alsbury out there. Jaden Alsbury out there, as we already know. Jalen Snead could play out there, or Jack Kaiser could play out there, who's been a starter at that position here for a while. And so to me, that's an answer at times, but you're still in a situation where if there's injuries and you're playing a team that likes to throw the ball or has a more athletic slot or spreads the field, moves tempo, you're now a little bit more limited on what you can do. So the nickel specifically is a position where Notre Dame is in a little bit of a tedious spot when you look at the overview of where they are. I've talked about this in the past. There's just a lot of different options that you could have, but all of them come with question marks. If you let's say, I've said this, I think Jaden Mickey would be a really good slot. I think most of the people in the chat think that Jaden Mickey could be a really good slot. But if you move Jaden Mickey to slot, then you're a little bit shaky on the outside. You could say, well, what about Chance Tucker or Clarence Lewis Christian Gray moving into the slot? Okay, well, if you do that, same problem. You're going to have some issues when it comes to your depth at outside corner. Well, you could ask a guy to cross-train at two positions. Well, maybe you could do that with Jaden Mickey. I think he's going to his junior year. You could maybe do that, and that would actually make a lot of sense. I don't know that I want to cross-train Christian Gray yet. He's already learning field and boundary. He's already having to learn two of those. Would he be in a situation where he'd be able to do that? Maybe, maybe not. You could say, okay, I see people in the chat. Well, move Ben Minnick there. All right, number one, we don't know that Ben Minnick can play that position, number one. Playing that slot position is a whole lot different than playing off safety, right? Number two is Ben Minnick is yet to prove he can be healthy for an extended period of time at Notre Dame as well. So moving a player that so far has battled multiple injuries in just one season doesn't give me like the warm and fuzzies that the depth chart has been solidified. And so there's just not a lot of no-brainer options right now for me. There just aren't. And there's other positions where it's like, hey, if this guy gets hurt, okay, no-brainer. You just move so-and-so over there, and you'll be all set. You've got the depth at this position. You're fine. So, like, if Notre Dame has some issues at outside receiver, and they say, okay, we're going to have to move Jaden Greathouse out there. Last year, that was a problem. This year, not as much of a problem because Jaden's more prepared to play it. You could maybe move Chris Mitchell to the boundary at times. You could have Jaden at the boundary at times. But now you're also still okay in the slot. You've got Jordan Faison. You've got Jaden Harrison. You've got KK Smith. You've got all these guys that can play that position. At safety, say, okay, well, move Ben Minnick down there. Okay, let's assume for a second that he can play it, and I don't know that he can, because I've always thought Ben was a downhill kind of guy, not a flip his hips and cover kind of guy. I haven't seen that from him. I don't know that he could play it. Maybe he could, maybe he couldn't. But here's the issue: you're now thin there. Okay, move Luke Talich down there and let him be that rangy rover type of guy. All right, fine. That's fine. But you're still having the same problem at safety. You've got a guy coming off a shoulder injury, playing closer to the line of scrimmage, and now who's your number 4 safety? Well, it's Ben Minnick. You mean the guy that I just said has the history of injury. So you got to be careful, sort of the old expression, right? Robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. You got to be careful about that, because you don't move a guy that, like Luke Talmadge, for example. If the season were to start tomorrow, Luke Talmadge is in your 2 deep at safety, which means he's going to play. You don't take a guy from that position, move him to nickel, and not play him, which Luke Talmadge would then have to be your 3rd nickel or 3rd guy at that spot. Well, you can cross-train him. Okay, that's not a bad idea, but Luke Talmadge is still learning to play safety. I don't know that you want to take these young guys and start cross-training them all over the place. So again, the Notre Dame is going to lose some players because of how well they're recruiting, and there's still talented guys in certain positions, but this is the issue that Notre Dame has at certain spots, that yes, there are options, but none of them are guarantees. None of them are overly experienced and natural, easy answers. And so that's what makes Micah Bell's decision a little bit more concerning for 2024 if there's an injury. And that's what this whole conversation is about. If there's an injury, if they're able to stay healthy, and this is where we're at right now, if they're able to stay healthy, then this isn't an issue. They're okay. If Jordan Clark can stay healthy, they're okay. If Jaden Osbury stays healthy, they're okay. Because if, and especially Jordan Clark, because if Jordan Clark's healthy and Jaden Osbury gets banged up, there are still things you can do with Jalen Sneed at Rover, Jack Kaiser at Rover, to still do what you did last year. You've got your nickel, and then you've got your base defense. If Jordan Clark gets hurt, there's things that I don't know that Jaden Osbury can necessarily do just yet at that position. It limits you a little bit coverage-wise. And that's why I say it would be more of that type of thing when we would have to look at and say, what's the answer going to be? That I'm not sure of. And that's what we're going to have to find out. Now, what I also think this could mean is maybe now when Notre Dame's looking at the portal, do they want to make sure now that there's a guy that could maybe play nickel as well? So if you get an outside corner, you have to ask yourself, can he play in the slot? So can Trayshawn DeVones play in the slot? I don't know. If you get Trayshawn DeVones as an example, who's an outside guy, does that give you more room to move someone inside? These are the decisions that the Notre Dame coaching staff has got to make right now. But they also still need to lose at least 3 more guys before they can even make that decision to get their numbers under enough to then start bringing guys in to add. And so while I think that they'll be okay if they can stay healthy, there are some things that could happen that would make me get a little bit more nervous about the depth chart for 2024. The depth chart for 2025 and beyond, very different story. And I'll get into that next in the final portion of today's show. I'll get into we're going to talk recruiting. We're going to talk a combination of the future for Notre Dame plus the 2025 class, where Notre Dame is, and why I think that the 24 season is a bridge between when you're a little concerned about a position and to where you're going to start to feel like you've done enough recruiting-wise to where you're going to be in a good place. So I'll do that next. Before I get to that section, folks, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And as always, if you have not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I know one thing being discussed in the chat is about Dylan Edwards, and I don't quite understand that one. I know that Dylan Edwards was a commit to Notre Dame, but if I'm Notre Dame, I'm personally not wasting those time on those conversations. I think that bridge was burned with not that him transferring is not, or him decommitting is not what burned the bridge. It was things that were said and done in the process and maybe not always being as open and honest about how things were going down. I also look at Notre Dame's roster and honestly don't see the need on Notre Dame's roster. Yeah, but he's fast. Oh, okay, fine. He'd be a fast guy buried on the depth chart. He's not going to play at running back over Julian Love. He's not going to play at running back over Jadarian Price. He's not going to play at running back over, in my opinion, even Keidron Young or Aeneas Williams. He was never a full-time running back. He was a guy that was going to be a hybrid guy. Notre Dame recruited him to be a slot receiver. Well, him going to Colorado opened up an opportunity for Jordan Faison, who's a more natural receiver. I'm not at all trying to say that Dylan Edwards isn't a dynamic player or isn't a good football player, any of those things. I think he is. It's just when you're limited on scholarships, you got to be smart about how you use them. And I don't know that Dylan Edwards brings a skill set that you necessarily so desperately need that you're going to try to, mend whatever fences that would need to be mended, and or is the guy that necessarily brings the role that he was originally going to have, right? So when you think about the role they recruited him to play, being a slot player, well, who are the slots for Notre Dame right now? It's Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison. They're pretty flipping good. They went and got Jaden Harrison out of the transfer portal to do some of the things that a guy like Dylan Edwards would be asked to do. You look at the recruiting that Notre Dame is doing, with a guy like Sean Terry, and then a player they're still trying to recruit for the 2025 season, and Tanuk Hines, who to me brings a lot more natural pass catching ability. So while I think Dylan Edwards is a very good football player, and my evaluation of him as a player has not changed from when he was committed to Notre Dame. He's a talented player. The makeup of the Notre Dame football team has changed to where I don't think it makes sense to add a guy like that. And this notion that, you always add speed, that's fine to say, but there's a right way and a wrong way to go about building your roster, and just adding speed without thinking about how's the fit, without thinking about the personality fit, the scheme fit, the opportunity that's there. So let's say Dylan Edwards comes in. He's not going to play as much as he's going to play at other places. I mean, can you guarantee me he's going to be okay not playing a lot at slot or outside because Jordan Faison's better than he is, Jaden Greathouse is better than he is, Chris Mitchell's better than he is? Is he going to be okay just being primarily return man? I don't know that he's going to be okay with those things. So while I was happy to get him when they landed him, I don't see the fit being the same now, or I shouldn't say the fit. The fit makes sense if you take out context of who's on the roster. I'm okay with looking at. Dylan Edwards is a guy that, with no context, sure, that's a skill set that you'd love to have. But when you add the context of what I don't want to do, guys, is I don't want to be in a situation where because he went somewhere else, it's like, oh, poo, he can't play, he's no good, they don't need speed. I'm really not saying that. In theory, there's you love having guys like that, but the reality is not theory. Reality is something different than theory. The reality is the depth chart is different now than when Dylan Edwards was originally committed. And he made the decision he made. He went where he went. He would have played a lot for Notre Dame this year. But now looking at it, you did have Jordan Faison break out. Maybe Jordan Faison doesn't break out if Dylan Edwards is here. Maybe he still does. You do have Jaden Greathouse, who right now I think is Notre Dame's best receiver. You have Jaden Harrison, who is arguably the fastest player Notre Dame has on offense. He's gone after this year. But then in the recruiting class, you're going to have some guys that bring that. So I just don't think the need is there for him in the same way that it was a year ago. And it, from the standpoint of, does it make as much sense now? Okay. But as much as you may not like it, the fact of the matter, Lamrek, is you may not like what I'm saying to you, but the fact of the matter is true. The bridge was burned. I'm telling you, practically speaking, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But you're also not going to do it when a kid burns a bridge. And Michael Campbell, you're correct. I didn't even bring up KK Smith, but KK is not Notre Dame's fastest receiver. KK has speed, but he's not their fastest receiver. Troy McIntosh, you're also correct. Logan Saldate. I forgot to mention Logan Saldate. I keep forgetting about him because he didn't enroll this spring. So they're good there. But you can't ignore that the bridge was burned. This is why I always say to people, there's a right way and a wrong way to make a decision. I have no problem with the decision that Dylan Edwards made. None. If you feel another place is better for you, do what you got to do, young man. I'll root for you, happy for you. But there's certain things that you can do on your way out the door that are going to say, nah, I'm not going to get there. And you can ask for me, but I'm not going to say publicly what it is because some things aren't your business. You can trust me or not. That's up to you. But what I'm telling you is the bridge was burned. And maybe they can try and repair it. Maybe they can try and fix it. But what I'm saying is, why? Why try and repair that bridge? Why go down that road? I don't think it makes sense. And I think the roster's fine. I don't think that there's any need for that, especially with the way that everything went down last year. So some of you are going to trust me, some of you aren't, and that's okay. You don't have to trust me. But the fact of the matter is I'm very aware of the situation. I know what happened, and this just isn't a road that you want to go down. So I did want to comment on that before we get into the final part of the show. So let's wrap things up with a look at the future at cornerback. So we discussed in the previous section where Micah Bell's departure could potentially create some issues in the slot if there are some injuries. I think it probably takes more than one to create that issue. But Notre Dame already has one injury at outside corner with Benjamin Morrison. Jordan Clark has had some moments and times where he's had some little bumps and bruises. No, I don't believe he's had anything major, but even something as simple as missing a game, depending on what game it could be, could create some issues that you have to look into. So I think there's a potential of it creating some problems from a depth standpoint. Right now, I think Notre Dame's going to be okay, even without Mike. I would still rather have him, but I think they're going to be okay with him gone. Where my confidence is even greater is kind of looking at the future of the position. And there's two aspects of that. One is, what's the makeup of your current roster? And from a depth and a youth standpoint. And then what do you have coming in? And so that's what we're going to do here in this final section. So number one, let's look at the present roster with the projection past 2024. Ideally, in a perfect world for Notre Dame, and some of you might disagree with this, but in a perfect world for Notre Dame, Benjamin Morrison's not coming back in 2025. What I mean by perfect world for Notre Dame is the only way Benjamin comes back, in my opinion, is A, he has an injury that causes him to miss a lot of time, or B, he doesn't play that well. And then he gets the feedback from the NFL that says, hey, you need to go back to college, right? I don't think either one of those are ideal. And you say, well, but that'll help him in 2025. Yeah, but is that really best for Notre Dame? Isn't what's best for Notre Dame in 2024 for Benjamin Morrison to be the best version of himself and be healthy and then dominate and then go be a first-round draft pick? I actually think that's better for Notre Dame than issues causing Benjamin to come back in 2025. And I know a counter argument can be, yeah, but look at 23. Cam Hart's injury caused him to go back to college, and him and Benjamin were great. And he he may become a day two pick. The difference is Cam's had some injuries that were more long-term problematic, and it wasn't a guarantee that Cam was going to leave anyway. The injuries ensured that he was going to come back, but Cam wasn't a borderline first-round pick before his shoulder injury. Benjamin's in a different situation. So I do think it's best for Notre Dame that he leaves. So for the sake of this conversation, let's talk about Benjamin being healthy and being the player that we all think he can be, and go from there. And so let's get into that. Okay. So assume he's gone. Let's talk about the future cornerback. Well, number one, what you have for 2025, you have Jaden Mickey will be back for 2025. You'll have Christian Gray back for 2025. You'll also have Carson Hobbs and Leonard Moore, plus your 25 recruiting class. So I actually like the cornerback depth for 2025 because you'll have Christian Gray, who I think has got a chance to be a star. You'll have Jaden Mickey, who's a very good football player. I mean, in past years, there's no conversation that Jaden Mickey's not only starting, but he might be your best corner. I mean, Jaden Mickey's probably your best cornerback on your roster in 2020, a playoff team. He's probably starting for you in 2019, a junior version of Jaden Mickey. Junior version of Jaden Mickey's starting for you in 2021, a team that went 11-2, right? I think he would have started over Clarence Lewis because he's already beat out Clarence Lewis. And Clarence Lewis was a starter in 20 and 21. So now it's like, okay, it's a battle. He may not start, he may start, but he's going to play a lot. So going into 25, you're in a situation where Jaden and Christian are starters. You're still great at corner as long as they're both healthy. And now you've got the young guys in Carson Hobbs and Leonard Moore will have a year under their belt, and they'll be pushing for those number 2 backup jobs. So that's kind of where they are. And so I feel comfortable with that, but you're going to need your freshmen to come in. But here's the deal. 25, you should be okay if you don't have any freshmen ready to compete right away. But I always want competition. Here's the issue. They could be going into 2026 without Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray. Jaden Mickey's done after 25. He played as a true freshman in 22. He played in 2023. So he's only got 2 years left. So barring him getting hurt and missing a chunk of this season, Jaden's only got 2 years left, which means 25 is his last year. If Christian Gray is the player I think he can be, it's not a guarantee he's going to be back either. And so when you look at the future of the position, where Micah Bell might hurt you a little bit is if he developed into the player that I hoped he could be, you have those 3 together on the field at the same time. In 25, you'd have Micah Bell in the slot, you'd have Christian Gray on one side and Jaden Mickey on the other. And then 2026, you might be bringing back Christian Gray and Micah Bell. Well, now you're not bringing back Micah Bell. You're not going to have Jaden Mickey. And it's not a guarantee that you're going to have Christian Gray for 4 years. He's that good. And so now this, to me, puts a lot of pressure on Notre Dame's recruiting efforts in the 2025 class. We could say, hey, listen, they can go to the portal. But guys, listen, there are some positions where Notre Dame can go to the portal and is proven to get starters. Corner's not one that they've been able to do that with any kind of consistency. They haven't necessarily needed it. You know, Trayshawn Devones is a guy that is a good player, but I don't know that he's a guy that you go out and get and he's starting for you and you go win a championship. Nick McLeod was a good football player. Nick McLeod saved Notre Dame secondary in 2020. There's no doubt. But we also saw against Clemson in the ACC title game, and we also saw in the college football playoff that there were some limitations to Nick McLeod. He's not Benjamin Morrison. He's not Christian Gray. He's not Cam Hart. He's not that kind of player. So we don't have evidence that Notre Dame can lose a Christian Gray or a Jaden Mickey and go to the portal and replace them with a similar caliber player. Cornerback is going to have to be a high school recruiting and development position that you then plug depth in and play. And somebody had mentioned, Lamreck, you mentioned Cody Riggs, and he was a good player. But I think we should be able to agree that Cody Riggs ideally is a guy that comes in and he's your number 3 corner if you're trying to compete for a championship. And that's the standard for Notre Dame. And so when you look at the 25 recruiting class, you're talking about kids that have a shot to come in and be in the 2 deep right away. And then you need to make sure you're recruiting guys that are then going out there in 26 and becoming that dude at their position. And now, whereas before you felt like if Micah Bell can develop, he might be your future nickel. Now you have no future at nickel. So Jaden Ausbury is going to be a redshirt sophomore in 25. But again, that's more of a hybrid position. You still need those cover guys. You still need those corner safety types. And that's where the future is really shaky. Outside cornerback in the very near present and future is loaded. Benjamin Morrison, Christian Gray, Jaden Mickey in the fall of 2024. 25, you still have Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey. You're really good there. Y'all know I love Leonard Moore. Carson Hobbs had a really good senior season. He can run. But after 25, if Leonard Moore's everything I think he can be, okay, you're good there. If Carson Hobbs is everything we hope he could be, you're good there. But what about what's behind it? And are you going to bring in guys that maybe can beat those guys out, or at least maybe beat out one of those guys? That's where the 25 class that's come in. But also now the 25 class has to restock you at nickel. That's a big key. And we're going to all look for different options. And like Eric Santini just mentioned, maybe Ivan Taylor. But this goes back to the previous conversation. Let's say you do move Ivan Taylor to nickel. Well, now your safety position's not as strong. So you'll want to keep Ivan Taylor at safety. You want to keep Jadon Blair at safety if you're able to get him. You want to keep, a guy like Ethan Long at safety. But but that's why getting a guy like Ivan Taylor is good, though, because if you get Ivan Taylor and you get Jadon Blair, now to your point, Eric, you can now say, hey, look, we can do some things with Ivan Taylor in the slot because you've got Jadon Blair, because you have Ethan Long, because you have Bronte Johnson and Kennedy Urlacher on the back end moving forward. You feel good about it. So for one, this makes landing Jadon Blair vitally important from a recruiting standpoint, because now it gives you that extra depth at safety to where a guy like Ivan Taylor, who's so versatile that he could play field corner, that he could play slot, or he could start at both safety positions, is huge. But if you don't get Jadon Blair, then it's going to be a lot harder to justify moving Ivan Taylor down and away from safety into more of a full-time slot position, because you kind of need that type of thing. So that's a big part of it as well. So I want to begin with specifically about Micah Bell's position by talking about how Jadon Blair could be a big part of that. But also what I've said is Notre Dame ideally wants to have more of a corner type of player to be there as well. And knowing Al Golden, I could see a scenario where he would want to have a corner there, a safety there, and a linebacker type of guy there, because every single guy gives you different matchup advantages. So when you look at the 25 recruiting, you have Cree Thomas already committed. Big fan of Cree Thomas, talented player, a guy that I like as a football player, a guy that I think brings a lot of ability to the table, and is very underrated player. You guys know I was very high on Benjamin Morrison when he was coming out, and while I don't have Cree graded out as high as I had Benjamin, I think Cree is still a very good football player. So he's obviously where this conversation begins, and keeping him in the class is going to be important. I have no reason to believe that they're not going to keep him in the class. I think Cree, from everything I've been told, is completely locked in and set and ready to go. So that's a really good place to start, because what I like about Cree is I do think he brings you some positional flexibility. As I've mentioned this before, I think Cree's a guy that could play safety, which he actually played as a junior in high school. I'm actually going to pull up some highlights. We're gonna watch a little bit of film here while I'm talking about this kind of stuff. How's that sound to everybody? So the thing about Cree is, yes, he could play some safety. He could play boundary, but he's not really a guy that I view as a, plug him in at nickel and let him play there. I think he's more of an outside corner to safety type of guy. And that's where I think his value is as a player. So he doesn't really specifically address the Micah Bell issues, but I do think he helps solidify the outside cornerback position. And if Cree's as good as I think he can be, he's at the very least a 2-deep caliber player that's going to be part of your rotation and provide you things that we saw Jaden Mickey provide the defense this past couple seasons. And so I think that's something that Cree brings to the table that I like as a player, and I think that's going to help Notre Dame as they move forward. But you will need at least 2 more guys at cornerback in this class, and so where Notre Dame is with Cree, the minimum of what they're trying to do is they want to add at least 2 more corners to the table. That's to meet the need of talent of numbers, just numbers. They need 2 more pure corners, meaning either nickels or outside guys, but second level cover players. So to me, when I talk defensive back, so you all understand where I'm talking about, there's second level cover players and then third level cover players. Second level cover players to me are more like the boundary corner, the nickel corner, and in Notre Dame's defense, the field corner as well. Now, sometimes the field corner can be kind of a third level cover player, but most times I count him as a second level cover player. Third level cover players are the safeties. Those are the guys that are either coming down or playing over the top, but they're a lot of times guys that are coming down, keeping things in front of them. So, when I look at Cree, I think he's a second level cover player that can play third level, but your other 2 corners that you get in this class have to be second level cover players. That doesn't mean that you can't have a guy that can play somewhere else, but their strengths are they are second level cover players. And so that's what Notre Dame is going to focus on. They've got to get 2. Now, beyond the 2 that you want to get, the need for Notre Dame numbers wise, minimum 2. I think they would go for 3. If you look at the board right now, I'll just go over the board first. I was going to kind of get into specific, but let's go over the board first. I'm a little scattered today, folks. I apologize, but a lot of good stuff to talk about today. So let's talk about the board overall, and then we'll break down each player. So number 1, looking at the board, there's 1 player committed, and you need at least 2 more. There are 5 guys on the board right now for Notre Dame at that cornerback position. And then, of course, guys that we all know. There is Mark Zachary from Indianapolis. He's the local guy that Notre Dame is very high on. And then there's the player that I think is the top guy on the board, which is Dallas Golden from Berkeley Prep in Tampa, Florida. This is my opinion, but also reading between the lines, there's a lot of people at Notre Dame that are very, very high on Dallas Golden. And the impression I get from the people I talk to is that they view Dallas Golden like I do, which is he's a gap closer, he's a needle mover, he's a program changer. He's that kind of guy that can play a lot of different positions. And so you've got him on the board. And I'll get into each of these guys a little bit more specifically as we dive into it. Then you get into a situation where you've got 2 other guys on the board that the staff is very high on. Actually, 3 other guys on the board that the staff is very high on. You have Tristan Haynes, who visited recently from Oklahoma. He's from Carl Albert in Oklahoma. Visited recently. Notre Dame they made a strong impression on him, and that thing went well. And then they had Chuck McDonald recently on campus from Mater Dei, another really good player from that can play corner. He's a little different. Him and Jameer Joseph are the other 2 guys on the board. I'll just talk about them together. Jameer Joseph's from Jersey. They're corners, but they're more pure outside guys that can maybe be third level guys. So they're in a little bit of a different scenario than Mark Zachary, who's more of a pure corner, and then Dallas Golden, who could play wherever the heck he wants. But ideally, he's a second level guy as well. So that's the board. Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, Tristan Haynes, Chuck McDonald, and Jameer Joseph. There's no doubt that the first two guys I mentioned are guys that the staff really wants. The thing that you have to understand, though, is they like all 5 of those kids. So I don't know that any of those 5 kids would be guys that they would say, hey, we're going to hold off on taking you because we're waiting on Mark Zachary to commit, for example. So that creates some interesting things. I think Dallas Golden's the kind of guy that if Dallas wants to come, you take him no matter who you have. I mean, that's the kind of player he is. So they like the board. It could expand, but right now I think the staff is comfortable with where they stand with all 5 of these guys to say, hey, look, of that group, we're going to get at least 2. And then hopefully you can get a third from that group. That's where Notre Dame is at. So let's start on just the second level guys first. It's very important, in my opinion, that Notre Dame closes on Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden. And I'm going to start first talking about Dallas Golden. I've talked about him a lot to you guys in the past. You all know what kind of player I think Dallas Golden is. I think Dallas Golden's a guy that, to me, brings big time ability to the table. And he's one of those rare players that could start at corner, outside. He could both outsides. He could start in the slot. He could start at safety. He could play running back for you. He could play receiver for you. Like, that's just the kind of guy I think he is. And where Notre Dame likes him, however, is as a corner nickel type of guy. Now, Dallas, to me, I always viewed him as a guy that you bring in and you put him outside, let him develop, and then as he kind of gets comfortable, you say, hey, maybe we can move him inside. Where I think the Micah Bell decision, it happening to me, I'm trying to think of the way I say this. I'll say it like this. I was going to make it complicated. I'm going to make it simple. Nobody is more impacted right away in the 25 recruiting class by Micah Bell's departure than Dallas Golden. And what I mean by that is, could Dallas have come in and beat out Micah Bell? Sure, he could have. Micah would have had an extra, 2 years on him. But with Micah Bell gone and Jordan Clark's gone after this year, Notre Dame will probably have to go to the portal again next year for a nickel. But you're in a situation now where if you land Dallas Golden, you may need to sit down and have some conversation with him and say, look, we'll start you outside. If you get here early, we'll start you outside. But, man, there's going to be a chance for you really quickly to move inside and play a bunch as a rookie. I mean, that's just the reality of it. He's going to have a chance, in my opinion, to come in. This kid's so good. I'm like, part of the reason why I'm a little scattered right now and not – because whenever I put Dallas Golden's film on, I kind of lose concentration on what I'm trying to talk about because I just can't stop watching this kid's film. He's so good. But he's the kind of guy that, to me, is a come in and play right away guy. He's a Benjamin Morrison type. He's a Christian Gray type. He's that kind of impact player that can come into your program and not just play for you as a rookie, but be a guy for you as a rookie. I really believe Dallas has that ability. And if you can get him in as an early enrollee, it'll make it even easier because Dallas is a little bit of a do-it-all player for Berkeley Prep. Benjamin was more of a pure DB. So Benjamin was more advanced fundamentally than Dallas. And that's not a knock at all on the coaches at Berkeley Prep. That's what they have to do with Dallas because he's so good. He has to help you in so many ways. But if he's a guy that you could even get in as an early enrollee and get him 15 practices of technical work, I don't know how you keep him off the field. I don't. And with Micah Bell leaving, I think that opens up the door wide open for Dallas Golden to come in and play and play right away. As far as where things stand from a recruiting standpoint, I still believe Notre Dame is in a good position with Dallas, but there's closing that needs to be done. Florida State's pushing hard for Dallas. Clemson's pushing hard for Dallas. He's a young man. He's smart. He's thoughtful. He's not going to rush into any decisions. He wants to make this decision once. From everyone that I've talked to that knows him, has talked to him, has covered his recruitment, I've only had a couple Twitter DMs with him, just asking a couple basic questions. Hey, you got a photo that I can use? Things like that. I haven't talked to Dallas or his dad about anything meaningful. So this is me telling you what people that I trust have told me, is that this is a sharp kid that wants to make sure that this decision that he makes is meaningful and impactful and long-term. He's not a kid that's interested in decommitting and flipping and playing that game. So that's why Dallas is taking his time with his decision to make sure wherever he goes, whether it's Notre Dame or Florida State or Clemson or anywhere else, that it's definitely the right place. So I do like where Notre Dame is at. They're going to get him back on campus again this summer. I don't believe his official visit has been established yet, but he will be back on campus in the summer. We do know that. But they've got to close, right? Because right now everybody knows who the team to beat is. It's Notre Dame. And so that's who everybody's shooting for. So this staff is going to have to continue to work hard to let Dallas know how important he is, to let him know how great of a fit he is. And I think that Micah Bell's decision to leave, I think just helped Notre Dame's cause when it comes to recruiting Dallas Golden. Now, from what I'm told, Dallas Golden has never been a kid that has said, hey, play me as a freshman or I'm not coming. I've never heard anyone tell me that. So I don't know that it's a situation. I'm not saying this is a situation where Dallas wasn't going to come or might not come because he couldn't play right away. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is sometimes, even when you're recruiting a kid who's bought into what you're selling, if there's new data that you can say, hey, man, we're not promising you anything, but now you have a better understanding of the opportunity that is in front of you, that helps. There's no way that just can't hurt. And with this decision by Micah Bell to leave, with Jordan Clark being a 6-year senior and the only other nickel being a linebacker, Micah Bell is going to, or Dallas Golden's going to know, I have a chance to go to Notre Dame and play right away. If I put in the work, if I can learn the defense, if I can do all these kind of things, I can play right away. And that's new for Notre Dame. He was always going to say, hey, you're good enough to play right away. But now it's not even just about him being good enough. It's about, hey, there's an opening now for a player like you to come in and play right away. Yes, we'll go to the portal and all that, but this is an opportunity for you to come in and really be an impactful player. And I think that's the message that Notre Dame can sell Dallas Golden for what he can do the next level. I'm going to talk about some other guys here next, but I'm just going to let you guys enjoy here for a minute watching the rest of Dallas Golden's highlights because this kid's really, really good. I've told you guys before, it's rare when you have a kid that could literally start for you at 7 positions. And Dallas Golden's that kid. He can start at field corner, boundary corner, nickel, field safety, boundary safety, slot receiver, or running back. I mean, he really could. He really could. He's a good football player. Yeah, so I'm never a big fan of turning his highlights off. He's just a really good football player. He's fun to watch. He's a lot of fun to watch. His ranking puzzles me a little bit. He's ranked kind of high, but it's not incredibly high to where I think it should be. And I'm curious as to why that is. I think he's a consensus top 100 player, I believe. No, actually, he's not anymore. Now 247 is the only one that has him in the top 100. Rivals has him 147th. ESPN has him 172nd, and On3 has him 125th. I don't know how you watch this kid play and have any thought about whether or not he's a top 100 player. I really don't get it. Really don't get it. He's very good. Yes, 99 problems. Yeah. I love the sarcasm in that question. I'm digging it. But yeah, I'm pretty high on Dallas Golden. And you guys know I don't get too fired up about guys like this very often. Not like this. Benjamin Morrison was that kind of guy for me. Jaden Alsbury was that kind of guy for me. There's some guys that just, boy, you just see him and you're like, that dude's special. He's ranked higher than Benjamin Morrison was when he committed. Benjamin Morrison was a 3-star when he committed Notre Dame. But it's a similar feeling. Like I told you all for a year that Benjamin Morrison was special, and he turned out to be so. And I'm just telling you, this kid is that same kind of player. He's that same kind of. He's a program changer. He's that guy that he shows up and you're like, that dude's different. That's a different kind of cat. Like, yeah, we don't have a lot of guys like that because not many people have guys like that. So he's a heck of a football player. Really, really good football player. Somebody at Jimmy Page, where does he want to play in college? He wants to play in the secondary, from what I'm told. He wants to play corner, whether it's nickel or outside corner. But I've been told he's very open to playing nickel. And so I would definitely sell that on him. Because I could see a scenario where it's him, Jaden Mickey, and Christian Gray starting together in 2025 in certain situations. So that, folks, is Dallas Golden. Obviously, the other in-state player that Notre Dame is looking at is Mark Zachary. His recruitment's a little bit interesting right now. I think Notre Dame is still the perceived leader for him. Michigan people will say that they think Notre Dame's the leader, and I believe that Notre Dame feels they're the leader. but there's still some closing that needs to be done with Mark Zachary. I don't think Mark Zachary is the no-brainer lock to Notre Dame that some people think he is. Mark Zachary is also a little bit different than Dallas Golden in that while Dallas Golden is a guy that can play inside, outside, safety, whatever, Mark is a pure corner. And I think ideally he's an outside corner. I do think he has some skill sets that make me think he could play inside, but I like him more outside. I think he's more of an outside corner, a cover guy in the Christian Gray kind of mold. You know, as a kid that's got speed, he's athletic. I wouldn't call him a burner. He's probably more Benjamin Morrison than Christian Gray from a speed standpoint, but his movement is really fluid. Pretty smart football player, a kid that I think has the football IQ. Because one thing about Mike Mickens, and I don't know if I've talked about this enough, but Mike Mickens puts a lot of value on things that most people do, you know, speed and athleticism. But Mike Mickens, more than any cornerbacks coach I've seen at Notre Dame, that he values football smarts. And a lot of people will kind of look past that with corners if they're really athletic and those type of things. Mike Mickens does not. I know, look, I'll just tell you right now, I won't name names, but there are some big-time corners the last 2-3 years that liked Notre Dame a lot, that Notre Dame would have had a chance to get if Mike Mickens would have pushed for him, and he wouldn't push for him because he didn't think that they had the feel for the game. He values football IQ. And that's what Benjamin Morrison has just in droves. It's what makes Jaden Mickey so effective. It's what makes Christian Gray's upside so good. Yes, they have speed and all that, but they're very smart football players. And Mike Mickens was on Mark Zachary before a lot of people were high on Mark Zachary because he saw that. He saw that football IQ. He saw that intelligence. He saw that toughness for a smaller kid. And then as the athleticism has taken off, then he's become a more impactful player. So this is an interesting recruitment. I'm very curious how it's going to finish out. I still like where Notre Dame is right now. I'm not quite as confident in that one as I was maybe a month ago, but there's still some closing to be done, and Notre Dame is going to have a chance to still get Mark Zachary. But landing Mark Zachary is important because he helps solidify your outside future. You've got Leonard Moore from last season. You've got Carson Hobbs. You've got Cree Thomas. If Dallas Golden could be that guy, but Dallas, as I said, could also be the inside guy. He could play everywhere, but Mark's more of a pure outside guy to me. And so if you land him with Cree Thomas a year after getting Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs, which comes a year after getting Christian Gray, I think that helps solidify things a little bit because he does strike me as much more of an outside type of player. Now, is he a boundary guy? Is he a field guy? That's still a little bit of a question mark for me. But I think when you look at Mark Zachary and his best positions, I do think outside cornerback are where he's best suited at this point in time. And so landing him is important. Is missing on him a deal breaker? No, it's not a deal breaker. It's just one of those things where, but if you're not going to get him, it is a situation where, you know, you're going to have to put some work in to get some other players that I don't know are no-brainer guys that you can get. But there's other good football players in this class that Notre Dame can take a look at, and we'll talk about those guys in a little bit. But there's no doubt when you talk to Notre Dame, you know, sources, and you look at how they are recruiting the position, it's very clear. I shouldn't say sources don't indicate this, but it's about how they're recruiting the position, because the sources I talk to say we like all these kids. But when you look at like the emphasis on certain things, it does come across that while there's 5 guys on the board for Notre Dame, it does seem that Golden, Zachary, and Tristan Haynes are kind of at the top of that list right now of guys that they really like. And so you can't deny that this is a kid that the Notre Dame staff has liked. They've liked him for a while. And at some point in time, they have to try to figure out ways to land more of these Indianapolis kids. And obviously Mark is one of those big guys. They're not going to get Damian Shanklin out of Indianapolis. Hopefully they can still get Mark Zachary out of the area as well. And hopefully they can. But he's a guy that the staff likes quite a bit at that position. So let's talk about the rest of the board here briefly before we get out of here and you all head to whatever it is you're going to do before you go join IB Nation Sports Talk tonight, because obviously that's, I think, something you guys are all going to be doing around 6 o'clock, right? I think so. And first I want to look at Tristan Haynes. We're going to talk about Tristan Haynes, Jameer Joseph, and Chuck McDonald. This is going to be Tristan Haynes. He is from Carl Albert in the state of that's this high school from the state of Oklahoma. Very dynamic player, long, fast, athletic. He's a very good wide receiver. He's a very good cornerback. He's more of a pure outside guy to me as well. And so he's a guy that I view as a top 100 caliber player at cornerback. He's still learning the position. He's one of those guys that, because he's a two-way player, he's not necessarily the most fundamentally sound guy. I honestly don't care about that. When you've got Mike Mickens as your cornerbacks coach, I don't care if a guy's got fundamental technique or not. Mike Mickens will coach that. What you want to know is, does the guy have the size you want? Does he have the athleticism you want? And does he have the football smarts that you want? And there's no doubt that Mike Mickens believes he has all of those things. He has the athletic skills, but he also has the football IQ, which is why Notre Dame is pushing so hard for him. He's going to be a tough get. Let's be honest. I mean, this tends to be a feeder school for the two Oklahoma schools. And it's, from what I've seen in the past, is kids from this high school that Oklahoma wants, they get. And if Oklahoma doesn't want them, then they end up going to Oklahoma State. So this won't be an easy one. And Notre Dame used to have actually a lot of success in the state of Oklahoma. If you go back and look in the 80s and 90s, Notre Dame got a decent amount of kids from Oklahoma. The Brooks brothers were from Oklahoma, for example, and they're not the only ones. Hasn't been a super helpful, productive state in recent years, but obviously they're going to try to change that with Tristan Haynes. But he's a guy that I know the staff likes a lot. He's got excellent skills, and the stuff that he's lacking right now is all coachable. It's all teachable. It's technical stuff. It's footwork. It's things along those lines. And so he's a kid that's got really impressive film. He's a guy the coaching staff is very, very high on. And while I did say earlier, obviously the staff really likes Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden, and Tristan Haynes, from my understanding, is Tristan Haynes is the kid that if he wanted to come, they're saying yes. They're not going to tell him no, because they'll take Dallas Golden no matter what. But they're not going to wait on anybody else and tell Tristan Haynes, no, sorry, we're not going to take you. They'll take Tristan Haynes. If he called Notre Dame tomorrow and said, hey, Coach Mickens, man, you know what? I've gone on all these visits. I love Notre Dame. I want to come to Notre Dame. The answer would be, do I have a spot? The answer would be, yeah, we love you. You definitely got a spot. So he's a kid to keep in mind. I think it's going to be tough to get this kid out of the state of Oklahoma, but I've just learned in the last couple of years that if Mike Mickens wants a guy, I'm not going to discount him at all for being able to get that guy. He beat Ohio State and LSU for a kid out of St. Louis, Christian Gray. So I'm never going to count out Mike Mickens. He beat Nick Saban and Jimmy Lake for Benjamin Morrison. So Notre Dame's going to be in the game because of Mike Mickens and Chad Bowden. But it's still one of those, yeah, but it's Oklahoma. I just got to see it. Look at that speed right there on that particular play, by the way. So I'm very high on Tristan Haynes. He'd be a guy that even if they don't get one of those guys that we know that we've known for a long time, but they get him, that's not a Tristan Haynes is not a consolation prize. And if you're able to get two corners and one, if Notre Dame's able to get two of Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, and Tristan Haynes to go with Cree Thomas, I think that's a heck of a class. I also believe that if the right three wanted to come, that Notre Dame would push for that and take that, especially now that Micah Bell's gone, because that's opened up a spot at the cornerback room. So if you want to ask me what my dream class is for Notre Dame in 2024 or 2025 class, you want to know my dream classes, I'll tell you right now. And I like Chuck McDonald a lot. I like Jameer Joseph a lot. But if I'm putting together a dream class, you have the three guys that you have right now. You have Ivan Taylor, you have Ethan Long, you have Cree Thomas. I'm finishing that class out with Jadon Blair at safety, home run. And I'm pushing for, and if I'm Mike Mickens, I'm pounding the table for give me Dallas Golden, give me Mark Zachary, and give me Tristan Haynes. I'm pounding the table for it, because that to me is that trio changes the game for Notre Dame. Two of those three is a big gap closing group to go with Cree Thomas. If you're able to get that 4-man group, then all these things we're talking about in this show today, what's the future look like? The numbers past 25 get a little bit sketchy. Who knows what's going to happen with this? Are they going to have enough corner depth outside? Are they going to have enough nickel depth inside? If you go out and get Cree Thomas, Dallas Golden, Tristan Haynes, Mark Zachary, with Ivan Taylor at safety and Jadon Blair at safety and Ethan Long at safety, you just landed the best secondary class Notre Dame has landed since Lou Holtz was the head coach. It's that good. It's a generational recruiting class in the secondary. I'm not – look, you could say I'm being hyperbolic, and that's fair, and I hear myself saying it, and I hear how hyperbolic it sounds. I hear how sunshine pumping it sounds, but I'm telling y'all, you're watching the film with me. You add this group of corners with Ivan Taylor, who's a top 50 recruit, with Jadon Blair, who I view as a top 50 to 75 recruit, with Ethan Long, who's a 4-star recruit, in a corner class that has Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, Tristan Haynes, and Cree Thomas, where Cree Thomas is your 4, and then the debates about who's number 3, is it Haynes or Zachary? That's a generational recruiting. That's a generational secondary class. It just is. Now, will Notre Dame be able to get it? It's going to be tough, real tough. But they're in the fight for it, in my opinion. And so, to me, and Eric Santini said it would be the best in the nation if Ohio State didn't have 2 5-star corners and good safeties. Look, Eric, you can continue to believe the recruiting rankings, but I'm telling you, I've watched every kid that Ohio State has in their secondary class, and they're excellent. If Notre Dame gets the kids that I'm talking about, their class isn't better. I'm just telling you, I don't care what Rivals says or 247 or On 3. I'm telling you, I've watched the film, and they would not be better. It would not be better. It's a generational class. It's a class that Notre Dame hasn't had in decades, and it's possible. It's going to be hard, but it's possible. There's no question about it. And the next 2 months, to me, are going to make this. It's going to make or break, right? Because you've got all of May. These kids are going to visit in June. You've got to close. It's a closing period for Notre Dame, and if they're able to close, then the future it's in the secondary is more of the same. More of the same, folks. It's going to be all Americans like Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts and guys that maybe don't get the credit but are excellent football players like Cam Hart. And it's going to be that. You're going to have that. But the difference is you're not going to have okay players at other positions. You're going to have a chance to have difference makers across the board. And for those of you who are young and older cats like me and Salty and some of the older guys in the chat, Michael Campbell, some of us that Michael Johnson that are in the chat, that we're older. We watched the Lou Holtz era. When Notre Dame was that program in the late 80s and early 90s, that's what they were doing every year. They would lose a guy to the first round of the NFL draft and replace him with somebody that was just as good, if not better. And that's where Notre Dame was. I think they can get there again as long as they got Mike Mickens and Chad Bowden and Marcus Freeman around. But that's what you've got a chance to do. We've seen signs of it, getting Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey and guys like that. But now they've got a chance to take this to a completely different level. And you can't deny the fact that the success they've had on the field is impacting that. Because kids see, I can go to Notre Dame and I can be a big-time football player and still do all the other things that I want to do as a student athlete as well. So they got to finish it up. They got to rack it up. They got to stack these classes on top of each other. But if you're able to, if you're in a 2-year span, able to add Leonard Moore, Carson Hobbs, Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, Tristan Haynes at corner, Cree Thomas. I mean, I'll put that cornerback room in 2-3 years up against anybody. That's what I see on film. And that's what they got to do. But if they miss on these guys, you're going to be good at corner, but the margin is now much, much tighter. So there's a lot at stake for Notre Dame these next couple months at cornerback recruiting and safety recruiting. Because as I mentioned earlier, speaking to Micah Bell's situation, if you are able to get Jadon Blair, that does give you some flexibility to be able to use Ivan Taylor in certain looks in that slot position as well. So that's where Notre Dame is at, everybody, when it comes to recruiting. There's a chance for this staff to put together a grand slam, home run type of class. But can they close? That's the question. Can they close? If they can do that, we'll see. But they've got to do that. And Archer made up with a comment, Ohio State fan, said if Ohio State lands their top targets of Brew, McNutt, and Deland, and Notre Dame lands their guys, both teams will feel like they have the best secondary class in the country. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's the key. It's not so much about who's better here, who's better there. It's these are elite secondary groups. And we can debate all we want. Is Ohio State's better? Is Notre Dame's better? And that's a fair debate. I'm taking Notre Dame's class. No doubt. I'm not as high on Trey McNutt as others. I think Jadon Blair is better than him. I think that Ivan Taylor's better than him. He's a good football player. But the point is, are you able to go out there and land? And this is, and for you, Archer, you're an Ohio State fan, so this is kind of what you're used to, right? This is why it's important for Notre Dame, because for a long time, they haven't been able to consistently put together secondary classes that they could look at and say, we can compete with Ohio State. We can compete with Georgia. We can compete with LSU. We can compete with Alabama. It used to be that way for Notre Dame. It absolutely used to be that way. You know, people forget when Notre Dame played Miami back in 1988, oh, Miami had all the athletes. Notre Dame had a top 10 draft pick at cornerback. They had a second-round, 10-year NFL vet at safety in Pat Terrell. They had 4 or 5 DBs from that team got drafted. And then when Todd Light left, he got replaced by Tom Carter, who became a first-round pick. And he got replaced by Bobby Taylor, who became a second-round pick. Jeff Burris started his career at corner, ended up moving to safety because of how low they were at corner, and he became a first-round draft pick at safety. Notre Dame used to do that on the regular back under Lou Holtz. It's been a long time since they've done that. And this is the opportunity is there. And to your point, Archer, is being able to be on the same level where you're having a debate of, is your secondary class better than Georgia's? Is your secondary class better than Ohio State's? That's where Notre Dame has to be. And they've been that way at corner in a couple of classes. The Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey, that was excellent. The Christian Gray and Micah Bell was very good. Well, now Micah's out of that. Leonard Moore, Carson Hobbs, another good class. Is it on the same level as some others? Maybe not. But this class gives you a chance to be really, really special. And that's why it's so important that Notre Dame can finish in this class. A lot of work to be done. But that's what they're shooting for. Before I get out of here, there are a couple super chats that I'm going to get to before we leave, and I appreciate those. Iden Benami says, like we've said before, the Marcus Freeman effect, gap closing. I agree with you, man. I mean, this is what he's changing. There's no doubt. The skill talent that they're landing on a regular basis is really impressive. Isaac Atkins with a super chat. Thank you, Isaac. If you could predict the top 3 defenses next year, who are you picking? You know, Isaac, I don't know that I have a good answer for that. I need to go and look at study a little bit more who's coming back, what portal pickups are happening. I do plan on doing some breakdowns on this when we get into next season, or get into the summer and we get out of the portal season, because we've had summer camp, spring ball season, the portal's picking up. So let's see how it goes. Just off the top of my head, I don't know that this is my top 3 because I'm going to give you more than 3, but some teams that I think are going to be in the conversation for having, 3 of the best defenses in college football next year. I think Notre Dame's going to be in that conversation if a couple of things can go right. I think Ohio State's going to be in that conversation. They had some key losses at linebacker, but they have some talented young linebackers that are battling for playing time this year. They brought back some really good ball players on the defensive line, especially on the edge. They got to find some answers up the middle for some guys they love, for Michael Hall, who's a really good football player. But they have a lot of guys coming back who played a lot of football. They should still be pretty good on defense. Georgia's got a chance to be really, really good on defense this year. They'll have a chance to be really good. Michigan is going to have a chance if Michigan's going to have a really good front 7, but I have questions about their secondary, especially with Rod Moore getting hurt. So they're going to have to answer some questions in the secondary before I'm ready to put them into the conversation. Texas, maybe. I still have questions about the secondary with Texas as far as being an elite defensive team. I think their defense is going to be good enough for them to win be a championship contender, but I don't know if they're going to be a top 5 team. I think Penn State's got a chance to have a top 5 defense this year. They're not there yet, but they've got a shot. I need to study Oregon more. I'm not quite sure of all they have coming back. They were very good last year. I got to study what Iowa has coming back. I would have maybe had UCLA in a conversation that's trending in that direction, but they lost their defensive coordinator to USC. But just off the top of my head, those are the teams that I think have the best shot to be those top 3 to 5 defenses next year. Alabama, to me, is going to have some talent, but they're going to probably have more question marks than they've had in a while. So they're going to be good on defense, but not elite like they've been. Those teams, to me, have a chance to have those really, really elite defenses. Somebody mentioned Utah. Utah's really good on defense, but they're never elite on defense. They're just good in their league. But I don't know that. I mean, you saw what happened to them against Ohio State, although they were very injury prone. Florida could score on them a little bit 2 years ago. So they're very good, but I don't know if they're like top 3 to 5 elite, in my opinion. I think Clemson, if they can find some answers in the secondary, I think Clemson's got a very good front 7 coming back next year. But they lost Nate Wiggins. They lost Andrew McCaba last year. So they're going to have to find some answers in the secondary. If they can find good answers in the secondary, they'll have a chance to have an elite defense next year as well. Will it be as good as some of the others? We'll see. I love Clemson's front 7. They just got to find some secondary answers for them to really be there. So that's just, like I said, we'll do more of a deep dive. Just so you all know, we're going to do it's not going to be a feature, but it's going to be subjects that we're going to talk about this summer when we get into the offseason, when Vince and I are getting together for our summer shows. We're going to do sort of a ranking the top different aspects around the nation, and where does Notre Dame fit? So we'll do like offensive defense, then we'll do backfields, receiver, tight end groups. We'll do O-lines, we'll do D-lines, linebacker units, secondary, and then we'll rank our top groups. And then if Notre Dame is in that top group, we'll talk about it, but then we'll talk about how Notre Dame stacks up against those top teams and where they need to be to get into that top group. So that'll be some fun stuff that we'll do this summer. And that'll be like a different show each time. Like we'll do a quarterbacks one day, and then offenses one day, and then defenses one day. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. So we'll do that more like in June and July after we've had a chance to study all the portal action and spring balls and really dive into each team and do more thorough analysis. But those are my top ones. Tyrell Wilson with a super chat. Thank you, Tyrell. Tyrell asked, Dylan Edwards just entered the portal. Is Notre Dame interested in him, or is he interested in Notre Dame? Thoughts? So, Tyrell, we had a segment about this between this section and the recruiting, and then the previous section where we talked about the future. And so I talked a little bit about that. If you want to go back and listen to that for a more thorough answer, you can. I'll just give you a brief response since you did give a super chat, which I appreciate. But I'm not going to necessarily repeat all of what I said. I don't know that would be a situation where Notre Dame would have a lot of interest. I haven't been told this by anybody at Notre Dame. I haven't asked this question. I'm just telling you, I know of what the relationship was like when he decommitted and how that went. And I believe that the way he decided to decommit has left it to where I don't know that Notre Dame would pursue him. If he called, would they listen? Possibly. But I don't know that's an avenue that Notre Dame would want to go down, number one, just because of that. Number two, I don't think the fit is there as much as it was a year ago. Or I say fit, the need is there as much as it was a year ago. Because of, you've got Logan Saldate coming in, you've got Jordan Faison on the team, you've got Jaden Greathouse in that position. You've got Sean Terry committed in 2025. They're recruiting Tanook Hines, who's a dynamic player. He's not a running back in college. So I don't know that there's the need for him that there was before. Combine that with the other stuff, I just don't think it makes sense. Unless he wants to just come and say, hey, coach, I don't care about playing receiver. I don't care about playing running back. I just want to return kicks. If he wants to do that, maybe. But I think that ship has sailed. So I'd be surprised if Notre Dame would – again, this is my opinion. I would be a little surprised if Notre Dame wanted to go down that road, to be completely honest with you. So thank you for the super chat. So that's going to do it, everybody. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Tonight, 6 o'clock, IB Nation Sports Talk. You're not going to want to miss that. I'll be back tomorrow with some more fun, interesting topics. I'm going to, when there's not news breaking, I'm going to dive into sort of a post-spring analysis of the team. That's going to be coming up. I'll talk offense. I'll talk defense. I'm going to go position by position, where things stand right now, what I'm comfortable with, what are my question marks, what answers we need to find. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, we'll have all those new segments at the end of those shows that I'm going to talk about. So it's going to be kind of like, taking some different topics, 2-3 different topics a day, talking about them in that kind of format, and it just giving you guys a little, instead of talking about one topic in one way and just rambling on and on and on, that you guys know I like to do. I like to talk, but I think it's more fun to have different segments and different aspects to talk about. So we'll do that. So tomorrow, probably, as long as there's no big breaking news, we'll talk about the Notre Dame offense, just what we learned about the offense, what questions still remain, just a general overview of where things stand today for the Notre Dame offense as they get ready to head into the fall, and what are some areas they're going to have to improve upon and find answers for as they move forward. So that'll be a fun topic as now that spring's behind us. Summer recruiting's coming up, summer workouts are coming up, and then, of course, before y'all know it, I mean, it's April 23rd. We're thinking, we got 4 months and a week before the first game, but I'm telling you, it's going to get on us like that, man. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what this football team is going to do this year. So I appreciate you. Anyway, folks, have a great rest of your day. And it's going to be a fun week. There's no doubt. Make sure you've signed up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I have a full breakdown of the Notre Dame offensive line from the blue team. I went play by play, broke down every play, graded every player on every play, handed out grades, gave analysis of what I thought of from the performance of the players. Talked a lot about, I think some of you are going to like what I said about Emil Wagner. And then tonight, I'm going to break down the gold game and do the same thing with the gold team of the offensive line. So really good analysis. I don't know that it's something you're going to find anywhere else. And we're going to start doing a lot more of that on the boards at irishbreakdown.com. But that's only for premium members. And so if you're not a member, sign up now. You can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Really good content, in my opinion. And I think the people that are in the chat that read through it will also agree that was really good content. So definitely check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll see you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.